I think we got over 1,000 submissions from people all over Australia and then also all over the world. And there was a few artists that I kind of hand-pick, like I send them an email being like, hi, do you want to apply to play? But most of them are just people on their own volition, just applying. When we do uplift an Australian artist, it's like we pick our 3 a year, and they're our artists, and they play every festival. And then by the end of the year, you've seen that artist, you know, at least twice, and then you get sick of that artist, and then you kind of dump them. I don't think I'm financially at a place where I can afford a music festival ticket. I get to go to some festivals for free because I work in the music industry, and I think I just kind of need to remind myself that when I'm programming, that I'm like, okay, you're not even paying for festivals, so like you have to actually think about what people would pay for.
Yeah, we were on the Saturday, which was like the no man's land. It was empty, so I rarely saw anyone else.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, we've been to it. So right now, we are joined for a slightly different interview to what we would normally focus on. It's not so much a musician, but we do love stepping outside and talking about music generally. And so we have now with us Ruby Miles. Now, Ruby, just before you were saying that you do wear a number of hats, so rather than me trying to rattle them all off and making sure I remember them all, we're talking festivals, radio stations, and a bunch in between. Could you explain to our listeners who you are, what you're about, and where you wear your hats?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess first and foremost, I'm tired. That's probably like my main... So I am a festival programmer. I am one of the programmers for South by Southwest Sydney. I do the music programming. I also am one of the programmers for Laneway Festival. And then in radio, I do a regular show on FBI Radio, which is like a volunteer situation. I do Friday Arvos with Al Grigg. And I also do fill-in shifts and dead graveyard, middle of the night shifts at Triple J sometimes. So if any of your listeners are insomniacs, you might hear me at like 1 a.m. just rambling, basically. But yeah, that's my 4 jobs. That's just what I've got so far.
That's right. You get to meet Dr. Carl, so it's not all bad.
Yeah, that was such a crazy experience as well. He's kind of exactly what you think he would be like, but maybe like times 10. It's like doing a shot of Cordial. It was like, whoa, Dr. Carl.
A shot of Cordial is unreal.
Yeah, just pure Cordial.
We've already 2 minutes in, got the episode title for this one, so we're good.
Yeah, fantastic. If we could start with your festival stuff, that's like immediately what sprung to mind is programming of these events. South by Southwest is a massive festival. It's only in its 2nd year in Sydney. For those unaware of South by Southwest, maybe we start there. Could you describe what the event is? Because I'd say a lot of people involved or interested in music in Australia would have heard of it, but knowing what it actually is a different story.
Yeah, and I think it's also a really difficult concept to explain. So I think we definitely knew that the first few years of having it in Sydney was going to be a few years of us kind of trying to teach the audience what South by is, because it's not necessarily just a music conference, but it's a whole conference of tech, ideas, games, screen. There's heaps and heaps of stuff that happens. It takes over this huge precinct in Sydney City. So all the pillars, ideas, tech, games, screen, music, and you can either buy a badge and be able to kind of see everything and go to the talks and go see the bands and go play the games, or you can just go and see sections. You can kind of just tailor what you want to see to what sort of package you get. But yeah, basically we program like a full week's worth of stuff, and it's like a theme park, and you just kind of run around and go and explore and listen to people talking, listen to new ideas. And what my side of things is like going and finding your new favorite band. And this one is Asia Pacific focused. So originally there was the first one, which is in Austin in Texas. And that one's been going for a really long time now. So that's super established. So you've probably heard of the name South by Southwest and you're thinking, oh, isn't that in America? But yeah, it's kind of got a reputation for being a place where you discover the next big artist, or you discover the next big Hollywood film, or the next best video game, all that sort of stuff. So we're kind of hoping to bring that to the Southern Hemisphere and showcase a lot of Australian artists and a lot of Asia Pacific artists, but then also we have artists from all around the world playing, and it's an opportunity for local artists to kind of see people and like be discovered by people from all around the world, maybe be booked on international festivals or signed to international labels or collaborating with international artists, and then vice versa, having these international artists come to Australia and be booked on Australian festivals and et cetera, playlisted and played on the radio and all that sort of stuff.
So you said it's your role to find these artists. How much, well, firstly, how do you go about that process? And then secondly, is there a bit of pressure on you to do that? Because if it is meant to be this platform to, have artists, become established or be found and then to progress their careers, every artist would surely want an opportunity like that. So there'd be, a lot of people in your DMs or contacting you, or what's your process, and do you feel any pressure to sort of pick the artists?
Luckily, it's not too many people in my DMs. We have a submissions portal, so we encourage everybody to submit a profile. So basically, the questions that we ask are things like, what music do you have out? What release plans do you have? What are you looking for from South by? So some people might be brand new and they're looking for a manager, or they might already have a manager, already have distribution in Australia, but they're looking for like an international label, or they're looking, to be booked internationally on tours and stuff like that. So we kind of look for stuff like that. Because we're in the second year, of the festival, it's still at its early stages where we're trying to, I guess, kind of create a version of what the Austin one is. So I think we got over 1,000 submissions from people all over Australia and then also all over the world. And there was a few artists that I kind of hand pick, like I send them an email being like, hi, do you want to apply to play? But most of them are just people on their own volition, just applying. So I actually just finished judging all of them this week. So I have a little bit of sonic fatigue. But yeah, does that answer your question? I can't remember.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, because I just was curious how you went about that process, and then if there was any sort of pressure, given it is such a good opportunity for a lot of these artists. But if it's all, is it just you, or are you with like a panel of people listening through all the applications and then selecting people from there?
We have, I feel like there's no real like easy cut and dry process with it, but I definitely make sure that I'm not the only person that listens to the artists. I also have another programmer with me, Reg Harris, and we call it the dirty work of like, we're just like going through the mass amount of submissions, and I guess the pressure part, we definitely feel a lot of pressure because obviously for some artists this will make or break their career. Well, I don't know if maybe not break, but like, I mean, you can always apply the year after. But we kind of want to make sure that we're giving a really diverse range of genres and people in our lineup. We want to make sure that we're kind of representing Australia with like what Australia sounds like. But yeah, it kind of like in the sense of we go looking in nooks and crannies. We don't want like one kind of singular Australian sound. We want to kind of really like represent like what it's like to be walking around on the street. Like you'll go in here and you'll see like a jazz band, or you go in here and you'll see like an indie rock band. And yeah, so we're trying to give quite a diverse lineup. And I think that's probably where the pressure comes from, just making sure that we're saving space for maybe smaller artists that could really benefit from a platform like South by Southwest Sydney, and also including some really like buzzy upcoming people who people will want to go and see. People will like buy a ticket to come to South by so that they can see like this artist, which is going to be the next big thing. So yeah, a lot of plates spinning, a lot of things to think about while we're judging.
So you're spinning like 8 plates and wearing at least 4 hats at one time too. I can imagine it keeps you busy.
It's also like a circus act.
You'd also be balancing, I suppose, the expectations of artists. So you don't want a whole roster of artists that are all looking for a manager there, I imagine. So you have to balance their expectations and their desires with diversity in sound and the actual people behind the music, opportunity pool for people. That's a lot to try and balance and then pick a program for.
Yeah, that's why it took so long for me to get through the submissions. I think submissions closed back in May, and I was just like smashing through them. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff to take into consideration, and we also want to make sure that it's worthwhile for artists to come, because we know that it's not cheap being a musician, especially if you're not Sydney based, like travel and accommodation and all that sort of stuff. Like, we don't want to invite you unless we think that you'll hopefully get an outcome from playing South by Sydney.
Yeah, and if we can bounce back to last year too, like having worked and still working at and with FBI Radio, you're kind of in the heart of art and culture in Sydney. They're definitely a big part of that. What impact did you see the event coming last year for the first time have on the Sydney arts and culture scene?
I mean, I feel like, well, because I was sort of in like the eye of the storm, I guess it was really hard to witness how it affected the scene. I think just because I was like right in the middle of it and I was like, this is crazy. I thought it was really great. I mean, it really sort of harkened back to like King Street Crawl days when that was sort of in its prime. I don't know if you guys ever did that in Newtown, but I feel like nothing has really felt like a whole city is shut down just to be filled with music in every venue. So I really feel like that made it feel special. And it was also really cool because it was a combination of, as an FBI listener, you know, I know a lot of the Sydney bands. I know how long they've been doing the tour circuits and, you know, playing in local venues and all stuff like that. But it was really nice to see Sydney bands doing that alongside other international acts or other acts from all around Australia, and how it kind of felt like they were given like a different stage or a different platform. Maybe they were playing in a venue that they've played in like 50 times, but they were given new people to perform in front of. We had like a lot of people from other countries come and, you know, suss out these bands. I think there was actually a few bands that got like picked up internationally or like got booked on tours because of their performance at South by. So yeah, I think it feels really different being in those crowds. A little bit kind of chin-strokey music industry sometimes, but also we're trying to make it accessible to punchers as well. So we want it to be like fun for everyone.
And I'm curious as well, as you know, you're obviously very Sydney based and you have a Sydney focus with FBI Radio as well, but we're obviously based on the Central Coast, and we're very involved in the Central Coast music scene, and we're very proud of a lot of artists who have come from here and are sort of showcasing on the national stage. As someone who's not from the coast, do you have a take on how the Central Coast music scene is perceived?
I mean, I feel like I always just kind of look at Sydney as New South Wales, like, or no, other way around, like New South Wales as a whole, I think. And we categorize our artists when they come through as by state and not like specifically by city or area. I want to like, I'm not sure where they are from. Maybe it's actually Northern Beaches, but are the good kids from Northern Beaches or are they from Central Coast?
I think Northern Beaches, unless it's one that we're
I hope they're Northern Beaches, because they're not someone necessarily on our radar as a coasty band.
Ah,
so.
Yeah,
damn,
but we have been missed. We have missed artists many a time before. No,
I mean, yeah, I feel like I will say, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, I think in the applications there wasn't a shortage of like a coastal indie rock band. People who were like, yeah, man, my favorite band is Ocean Alley. Let's just say we're never going to run out of those.
Yeah, it's a very strong genre within Australian culture. And I think that's why also it's important that it's not just you assessing all of these applications. It's a collaborative approach, because Eamonn and I, we did a community radio show on the coast for 6 years, and going through, we had submissions as well, and we had, I guess, a bit of a sound that we had for our show. We didn't go too far outside of that, but it was still, you're going through all the music submissions, and we have, I guess, if you're looking at the Venn diagrams, there's a lot of common ground between Eamonn and myself, but then on either sides, we also have our own tastes that are sort of different from each other. And that would allow us to sort of expand the sound of the show a bit more as well, as opposed to being a bit more of the same. But you've got that with the collaborative approach, but then you're also actively trying to get people from different genres and different areas and different sounds involved in the festival as well.
Yeah, and I think me and Reg work really well together, because I think I'd say Reg is like very far left. He actually used to be the music programmer for FBI, so you can probably imagine he has some very unique taste, and I think I would be sort of like, I always thought I kind of had like left-leaning taste, but I think compared to him, I think I have more of like a centrist music centrist taste. So I think we kind of balance each other out. He'll kind of go out there with some of the submissions and be like, oh, this is really amazing, this is really crazy, and then I'll kind of come in and I'll think, oh, like this band's like doing really well on Triple J, or oh, I think this will be like a really big crowd will come to this one. And yeah, so I think we kind of balance each other out. I think we're also we get pretty genre agnostic at times as well. Like, I think obviously our taste does kind of shine through, but I think we do kind of think about it in the bigger picture. And so even if it's an artist that isn't necessarily our taste, we'll look at their application and we'll look at their streams, or we'll look at like what they have planned for the rest of the year, and we'll be like, oh, this artist actually would really benefit from being on the program. So don't worry, you don't have to you don't have to be me and Reg's favorite artist to get played.
And I'm curious to how it compares to the Laneway programming, which you also do. Laneway's kind of long been known as the major festival on the Australian scene that picks artists before they're big, or, like had X artists play it there 3 years before they blew up, and had that kind of really refined taste and rarely got it wrong. So when I look at Laneway as a festival to be programming, it feels again like one of those ones where there is that bar's almost a little bit higher, because other other festivals seem to draw in artists that are more established, but Laneway's always had that niche. How does it compare for you working with Laneway?
I mean, I think it's kind of fun having both jobs, because it's almost like, I feel like if I was just working at Laneway, I would still be looking at things like South by Southwest and Big Sound, and I look at the Great Escape over in the UK, which is like kind of like that festival, but over there. And it's kind of nice because it's like I get to sort of see the real early stages of artists that if we sort of nurture them and give them what they need to grow, they can eventually play at Laneway. And I think we even had, do we have an example of that? I'm trying to think. We had like a Laneway at South by Southwest Sydney and also South by Southwest Austin, like little presented showcase. And I mean, I don't want to kind of give anything, any like insights I'm not meant to, but like often we'll do these showcases, particularly with Austin, not so much with the Sydney one, I think. I'm trying to think of who was on the Sydney lineup. No, we didn't do it with anyone on the Sydney lineup, but when we do it yearly in Austin, it's often us kind of testing our artists to see how they do later at Laneway. So we kind of pick artists that we really like and see how they go in the showcase and see how they're received, and then we can be like, okay, maybe we'll bring you over next year. So yeah, I mean, I feel like it has a direct correlation. It's definitely a different approach at Laneway, I think, because I'm looking for artists that are much more down the line in their careers. We want to take risks and book artists, like you said, before they blow up. But then you have to be kind of pretty strategic with the timing, because we don't want to get an artist that nobody knows and then by the time they come to Australia, people still don't know them. We kind of have to like make sure that we are like pretty certain that by the time they come to Australia, they're going to have fans. I think we did that with Ray last year. We booked her quite early on, and we were pretty certain after, what's the name of the song? Escapism. We were pretty certain that she was going to make it big, and then by the time she came to Australia, it was a big moment. And also another one is Fred again. Like, I think I kind of had an inkling that King was going to blow up. And then by the time he came to Australia, we actually had to move him from the dance stage because we thought that it was going to be a dangerously large crowd. So I think that year we had to move him to the main stage.
I think the whole city or the whole of Australia was dangerous when he was in the country because it was nuts. I've not seen anything like that in terms of fever from one artist being on the... I mean, maybe I'm not even going to make the obligatory reference. Come on. Maybe Taylor Swift. But outside of that, like Fred again's impact when he arrived was nuts. And having booked him earlier... that wasn't that way when it was booked, so kudos for that selection.
Yeah, thanks. That's my bragging rights for life, I think. Whenever I'm trying to ask something from my boss, I'm like, well, who told you about Fred again?
Yeah, you got to back my instincts a little bit more because I absolutely nailed that one. How long?
Now I can go really rogue with my suggestions as well.
So there's this minimalist progressive emo core band from Romania that I think is really going to hit. Can we book them?
Honestly, that's not too far from an artist that we tried to book, but I can't tell you who it is.
We won't tell anybody.
Okay.
How long have you been working at Laneway for?
I started in 2019, so it's a long time.
What a fun time
like
to enter the festival scene.
Exactly, yeah. It's a long time, but if you actually look at it, I've only done 3 festivals.
Yeah,
but I've programmed a lot of festivals that didn't happen. So you'll never know.
The work was done, but nobody saw the outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, you perfectly foreshadowed what I wanted to kind of touch on next, because you're definitely in and amongst the Australian scene generally with a great eye for kind of what is going on. So what is going on in your view? Like, it's been not ideal, and we've had our own suggestions and ideas, one of which being that maybe the model of Australian festivals was getting a little bit stale and it wasn't landing. Of course, cost of living is playing a pretty big role. Maybe people were getting kind of tired of artists, I'm not sure, but particularly in terms of the way festivals are going, we had rolling sets, which is kind of the national ish festival that's landed on the Central Coast, which is kind of a big deal for us up here. And it was announced, you know, its date and everything, no lineup yet the other day, but I couldn't help it. The first thought that crossed my mind when it was announced was, oh, is this going to go ahead? And I was wondering what your take on all of that would be, because you're operating, you know, well within the scene in Australia.
Oh, I don't even know where to start. It's, I mean, look, I think the main thing is cost of living. I think that's like got to be the highest thing up there. I always say this, and I use it for good and I use it for bad too, but I don't think I'm financially at a place where I can afford a music festival ticket. I get to go to some festivals for free because I work in the music industry, and I think I just kind of need to remind myself that when I'm programming, that I'm like, okay, you're not even paying for festivals. So like you have to actually think about what people would pay for. I think, yeah, cost of living has to be the main thing. And obviously music and festivals is one of the first luxuries to go when you do feel the financial pinch. People just aren't keen to spend those fat stacks on those sort of weekends. I think the other thing that is contributing is, especially over like kind of post-COVID, over the last few years, I think people are seeing lots of footage of international festivals and they're like, why doesn't mine look like that? And I totally get it. I see, you know, like Glastonbury and like Coachella. I'm like, oh my God, I want Lana Del Rey to headline a festival in Australia. The reality is, it's just so expensive to come to Australia. The Aussie dollar is not good. And these artists are just like, oh, no. So yeah, just those artists and the cost of flying their, you know, 35-person tour party and all of their stage setup and all of their tech setup, all that freight costs so much money. You're a New South Wales-based podcast, so you probably know that New South Wales, it's even harder to have music festivals because of how much insurance is and how much we have to pay police and stuff like that. So I think it's so easy for festivals to tank now, because it's just like, if we don't see a profit immediately, we've made a loss. And people just aren't interested in buying tickets to things right away. So I think that's why you get that festival that announces the lineup and then 2 weeks later they kind of shut it down. And I remember being on Reddit, which is a scary place to be, but I remember being on Reddit and seeing people talking about it and being like, people don't want to buy festival tickets because they're scared the festival will cancel. And I think it's just a really funny like chicken or the egg thing, where it's like, the festival will cancel because you're not buying the tickets. It's quite easy to get a refund. Like, I feel like that shouldn't really be that shouldn't be at the top of your worries. Like, live free, be happy, buy the festival tickets. I think I digressed a bit. Hold on. Let me come back to where we are.
It's a big question, so you're completely within your rights to go wherever you want with it.
Totally. I mean, I just think I have so much to say about it. But yeah, like, it could be down to festival models. It could be a time where things are going to kind of shift around and festival models will change. Maybe we'll have some festivals go away and some new festivals come up, which will kind of be more appealing and more successful. But I don't really think I've lost faith in Australian festival industry. I think we're going through a tough time. I think it would be really good if the government kind of chipped in a little bit to help us out during this tough time, especially when damn, I'm running my mouth right now, but like, I think when Splendor cancelled, there was a lot of people talking about how much of a loss it was for Australian artists, so that they didn't have a platform to play. And I think the government was like, oh, this is such a loss for Australian artists. We're so sad for Australian artists. but I feel like they didn't mention anything about the festivals. Like they were quite happy for festivals. Like,
Yeah,
oh, whatever.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, all these young people drinking and taking drugs and yada, yada, yada. We don't need that in our culture. But the music, that's sad. But everything else around the festival, too bad.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're an Australian artist, I think don't worry because apparently, like, you're being backed by the government. But I think festivals we're on our own. We've got to go work it out. But
and the two have nothing to do with one another.
Yeah. I think things will kind of bounce back and, you know, as the economy fluctuates, festivals will always be like an important thing. I think it's Australian culture, honestly. I bloody love wearing welly boots and rolling around in the mud and getting sunburnt and stuff.
And
it's my lifestyle.
And I think as appealing as it is to get big international headliners, a major part of these music festivals, I believe, is to help the local industry, help musicians locally get a platform, and for them to be, you know, to elevate their careers is sort of what these festivals, and, you know, just supporting the industry itself instead of paying exorbitant amounts of dollars to get international headliners, actually give that money to a local Australian musician and help the industry locally. Like, yeah, that, and you touch on so many points that I have comments on that I'd love to just keep going down and keep discussing as well, because it is, you know, we've discussed it ourselves so often, but to have someone who's actually in charge of organising some of these festivals and planning and booking artists, it's what's your take on, you know, perhaps Laneway in particular, because we mentioned it's sort of a niche festival and you mentioned the models of festivals too. Do you fear that, you know, if you're not looking at those massive international headliners and you're getting, you know, trying to unearth more artists, is that perhaps a positive way for festivals to go, or is that too risky in the current economic climate?
Look, I wish I knew the answer. I think I'm so scared to say something and then like our festival cancels next year and then like people like bring up this audio and they're like, what? I mean, yeah, like, I mean, that's a great example of how much we don't know what is going to happen. You know, we're hoping for the best. We're not expecting the worst, but like we're, you know, aware that a lot of festivals have been cancelled this year and that, you know, we're just kind of hoping that we have that special recipe that people want. I think like an advantage for us is that we're a one-day festival and we're also city-based. So it won't cost people money to, you know, get there, and also like accommodation and stuff like that. So hopefully that kind of makes things a little bit more affordable for people. We're also, yeah, like a one-day ticket price is obviously a lot cheaper than a 3-day ticket price with Laneway. But yeah, I wish I knew the special recipe. I think people also bring up like lineup repeating and stuff like that, which I agree. I get the shits when I see a lineup and I'm like, okay, I saw all those artists last year. There's definitely some artists that, well, I think it's funny because, like you said before, Laneway often books artists before they blow up. And so I think people commenting about lineup repeating is like, well, did you see that artist on Laneway? And then now they're huge. And so they're playing like Splendor or like a New Year's festival or something. So yeah, there's also just like a limited number, if you can believe it, a limited number of artists that want to like tour this market, and a limited number of artists that actually make money in Australia. So I think that's kind of why lineup repeats happen as well.
Yeah.
Whether it's a good thing or bad thing, who knows?
It's definitely a bit, yeah, I feel like, I mean, you can get to the core of like Australian identity with this, but I think I was thinking about it today, we're so like England, US focused, and we have been since we were, since modern Australia was created. And And I think we just haven't lost that entirely. Like, and I suppose with social media, the world is so global. We are so focused on things happening elsewhere. But you don't need us to tell you that there is like so much in one city and one area, let alone across the whole country. There's enough to satisfy everyone's interest and everyone's taste if it was promoted by other media. And it's obviously not Triple J and FBI that aren't doing the heavy lifting there. They're doing a lot of it. It's kind of a lot of other places that seem to prioritize that, obsession with cultures that aren't our own, and lack of promotion of that. And then we're in this like cycle now where we only want things, but there's so much on our own shores that if people were exposed to it or they had the tools to find it, they would be able to see that and understand it and become fans. And maybe we could have these far more diverse lineups with far more names that are known more widely, but we've kind of pigeonholed ourselves, and then we end in this little dead end here mixed with the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, definitely. And we also kind of struggle, I think, in Australia with when we do uplift an Australian artist, it's like we pick our 3 a year and they're our artists and they play every festival. And then by the end of the year, you've seen that artist, at least twice. And then you get sick of that artist and then you kind of dump them. I think that's kind of the thing that is hard booking Australian artists for Laneway, is just finding something that like is still cutting edge, that people still want to see. And I love Australian music. I'm doing it in every sort of facet of my 4 jobs. But it is like a difficult line to walk, especially when, Laneway's a business. So, we want to curate like an awesome lineup, but we also have to make business decisions and like book stuff that will sell tickets and stuff. So that's what's challenging about booking Australian music. And yeah, it is, again, one of those things where it's like, well, if they're booked on Australian festivals, then they'll get more media coverage in Australia. And then we go, well, if they had more media coverage in Australia, then they'd be easier to book in festivals. And so it's that kind of, everybody's sort of pointing the blame in every direction. But I guess that's where South by Southwest Sydney comes in. And we are kind of here to say like, oh, no excuses. Like, here's all the next acts, and you guys have the resources to make these artists the next big thing. So sort of here they are on a silver platter, and do what you want, make them stars.
I was going to touch on that too, because the model of South by Southwest, we talked about festival and models and stuff. It's very different because it's not just, trying to showcase artists. It's not just music as well. We touched on at the beginning. It's also screen, gaming, tech and innovation and all of that as well. Do you think perhaps, festivals like Splendour or Laneway as well should maybe look to start incorporating more than just music at their festivals? Would that perhaps solve some of the pain that we're feeling with it?
I'm not sure. I think with one-day festivals like Laneway, people are just there for the lineup. Like, we've always toyed with ideas of kind of having interactive things and cool stuff that you can do, but like that just takes people away from the stages where the music's playing that they've paid to see. So, I like the interactive stuff more on multiple day festivals, like going to Splendour and kind of playing with the activations and all that sort of stuff. That's really fun. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe there is kind of a room for festivals to be more open like that and have more stuff. I'm sure Coachella's all over that already. When I finally have the honor of attending.
Programming.
Programming. Maybe I can see if I can get a tax break and say it's a programming trip.
Yeah, I'm sure you get away with that.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess like South by is like pretty original in that sense of it's a bit of everything, and I wouldn't necessarily say that it's like a really great model for your everyday punter. It's definitely something that is targeted specifically to industry. We call it like industry to industry, business to business, that sort of thing. just because it's like, oh, we're showing you innovation or we're showing you new stuff, which is normally not what festivals are. Festivals are normally like, here's what you like.
This is what you paid to see.
Yeah, exactly. So our target audience with South by is the curious, people who are actually wanting to be shown new stuff. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a model that like your average Australian festival should try and replicate. But
I didn't necessarily mean all the specifics around it, but more just having more activations and more things aside from just having one or two stages and music. And I think, as you mentioned, the one-day festivals, that's probably not going to work as well as your 3-day, your camping. The music starts a bit later, so you wake up in the morning, there's different activations for you to do. It's a bit more happening. Like we have a New Year's festival on the coast, and they have sort of different, like I think there's yoga workshops, and there's sort of different sort of creative things happening that's not more than just the music, and that seems to be working quite well for them and other festivals who adopt similar things.
And if I can give the punters, if I can give the punters insight, of all the multi-day festivals I've been to that have had yoga, every time I've been like, oh, that'd be cool to do. And I've not once ever rocked up to a single yoga thing. I know other people do, but yeah, maybe that is that insight into the punter that people like me at least don't end up going to the yogas.
Yeah. I'd love to be that person, but unfortunately I'm too scat in the morning and I'm having a bacon and egg roll. So not stretching. But I love that stuff.
Can you actually enjoy a festival now that you're on the other side where you're programming and you're organising festivals? Can you actually go to a festival and switch off and just enjoy it as a punter? Or are you making little, things in the back of your head going, oh, they might be a cool artist to look into a bit further, or I like the way they did this or organised that?
I think bit of both. Depends how many margaritas I've had. I think I can definitely enjoy a music festival. I've done that a few times.
It's not a hard thing to be able to enjoy.
No, I know. Yeah, I try and have fun. I think, obviously I'm a huge music festival fan, so I do still attend festivals and have a good time. I think I do kind of at the back of my mind just take note of the differences between their festivals and my festivals, and artists that I'd want to book and artists that draw big crowds and artists that don't draw big crowds and all that sort of stuff. I feel like you kind of never switch off with stuff like that. Even when it's like, sometimes I can't even like just listen to music. I have to be like, ooh, do I have to pitch this to my boss?
And for those for South by Southwest that are wanting to attend, if they want to do the industry chin stroking collectively with their peers, or if they are, an artist that wants to check it out, obviously submissions for the festival have closed for this year. Where and when for this year's edition of the festival?
Yeah. Okay. So the festival takes place over October 14 to 20. But the music aspect of it is the 15th to the 19th. And so that includes conference. So we'll have like speakers and panels and stuff. We're working on some really, really exciting stuff in that area that is yet to be announced. There's also stuff like workshops and a lot of sort of like mingling and mixer events and stuff. So if you do work in the music industry and you want to meet other people and network, they're really good. Or if you're an artist, like the workshops are really good. But then kind of the real meat of it, or I guess the bit that I really care about is like the music festival bit, the bit that I programmed with Reg. That's on, the 16th to the 19th. And so you can either buy a music badge for it, and that will just get you access to all of the music stuff. And then I think it gets you like a less priority access to the rest of the stuff, like the gaming and the screen and stuff like that. Or we're working on for like your average punter, for like just people who are just really keen to suss out the music. I think we're going to be coming out with a like more accessible option for them a little bit later on, but I can't tell you what it is yet.
So many secrets in this interview.
It's actually hard to keep track of the timeline. I'm like, what can I tell you guys? Like, when does this air?
Yeah, and this will be out, I think, within the week as well. So there's not too much that you can delve into, knowing, oh, yeah, this will be released closer to the festival. This is pretty timely from when we're having the chat. So all those considerations. But before we do wrap up, I just want to quickly, you touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but your radio career as well. You've been at FBI, you said, for 10 years, and you've also been involved in Triple J as well. How did you sort of first get involved? I imagine, like most community stations, you just rock up and you go, this is pretty cool. How can I get involved?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I knew I wanted to do, well, I kind of just set out in life wanting to do radio. And so I think somebody told me about FBI, and I applied to volunteer. And I think most people at FBI have a really similar story of, we started working the front desk, and then we would kind of, I'm old enough to say I was like sorting through the CD submissions, which is like pretty crazy. They don't do that anymore. But yeah, working the front desk, and then I was producing, and then I finally got put on the all-nighter roster, which is, graveyard shifts. And then I got the breakfast position up for it. So I did that for 2 years, and that was like quite a like intense ride, I think, because normally when you're volunteering, you're just there for a few hours, but breakfast was a full-time role. So kind of rocketed the radio career from there. And yeah, it was really fun. And yeah, pretty much me working the breakfast show got me my Laneway job, because Laneway was scouting for a young person that knew stuff about music. And I didn't have any programming experience or any music festival experience at all. I was just like playing songs on the radio and talking about them, and they were like, yeah, cool. And then after doing breakfast radio, I kind of hit up Triple J and was like, hi, would you be interested in me? And they were like, no. And I was like, oh, okay, all good. And I would basically just like annoy them. Like every 6 months or so, I'd send them a reel until I pretty much gave up, because I was like, I'm busy enough. I'm doing Laneway, I'm doing South by. And then, I think, hate it how it's like that. But like the second I kind of gave up on that dream, they were like, wait, do you want to come and do late nights? And I was like, oh, okay. So occasionally in the middle of the night, you can hear me yapping.
There we go. So if you're listening out there, genuinely, you don't have to be dependent on certificates or weird jobs or whatever qualifications. You just have to be passionate and good at delivering it. And Ruby Miles is an example of that. So Ruby, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all your insights, all the things you can share, all the things you maybe can't share, and everything in between. You wear a bunch of hats and you're spinning heaps of plates, and we'll let you take them off and put them all down now and just enjoy your night. But it was great to have you on, and hopefully you've inspired someone out there listening to at least get involved with some events in Australia, or buy a ticket sooner, or do that community radio stint they've been considering, or anything else. Yeah, totally. I think just like get out there. I didn't have any experience when I started any of my jobs, and actually no, that sounds like I'm making it sound like it's a bad product. I had an experience when I started at South by, at least. We know that one's good. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
No, thank you for coming on and taking the time. We really do appreciate it.
Cheers.
This episode of Homebrewed, the amazing episode that it was produced by my good friend Eamonn Snow. It was recorded on Darkingjung Land. And for more from us, head to www.homebrewed.au.